All right, guys, we're talking about Bring Her Back.
I didn't know this was an Australian movie. Good for them.
Yeah, so it's directed by two brothers, actually, Danny and Michael Filippo, and they also directed The Babadook and Talk to Me. I have not seen Talk to Me, but it's actually set in the same universe as Bring Her Back, which I didn't know until I did research. So, first things first, to our audience, we're definitely going to spoil the absolute hell out of this film. If you haven't seen it yet, I personally recommend it. It's a good theater horror movie. Those are pretty rare. But without further ado, we're going to spoil it, and we're going to start with our individual ratings of the film. I will go ahead and go first. I really liked it. I really, really liked this movie. I was not expecting to like it. I went in completely blind. I had not even seen a trailer. I knew nothing about it. I sat down, and that was my first introduction into this universe, again, because I've never seen Talk to Me. I was very pleasantly surprised. So I'm just going to start with a rating. We'll get into why I liked the movie later. We'll get into why other people may not have liked the movie later. But I will give it a B plus for a horror movie, and I would say on a number scale, it's maybe a 7 out of 10.
That was awfully generous. You know what? I'm not gonna lie. There were some good parts about the movie, and then there was some parts that had me confused. I'm not sure if it was the movie itself or if I just missed something in the narrative. I understand that the boy was supposed to resurrect the daughter, but how the fuck did he get that thing inside him? I know she was watching videos of the ritual, and they were hanging one lady, and there was one lady who was already dead, and this little creature went, and I think he ate the dead person's nose, and it went over to the other one and maybe kissed him on the forehead, and they came back alive. I don't know. I missed something.
Well, we will get into how the ritual works later, but I think that's part of the beauty of why this movie's actually pretty decent for a horror movie, because they don't just lay everything out for you like a lot of movies do. They're not treating us like idiots. They're giving us the keys, but we actually have to figure out which doors they unlock. Like, we have to make the connections, and I like that. I like that it's not just explicitly laid out. So
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a D plus because there were some positive things to it that we'll discuss momentarily. I got lost in the narrative. I'm not sure if the story was incomplete or if I just missed something important. But by the end of the movie, I was like, I have no idea what happened. You know?
Yeah, I generally kind of disliked the film. I actually went in with positive expectations. I watched the trailer beforehand, and it left a positive impression on me. It didn't give too much away, and I was like, this seems like it's genuinely going to be disturbing. Of course, everybody on Reddit and whatever was saying it's disturbing and saying like, oh yeah, it's like I couldn't even like move for 15 minutes after the movie ended because I was just so stunned and shocked. And so that's kind of what I'm going in with to some extent, is like the expectation of like, okay, this is something that is going to be like pretty special. And I came out of the movie theater very disappointed. And I think my reasons for disliking it are going to be very different from yours, Kevin. If I had to give it a rating, I would probably say C. And, out of 10, it would be like a 5. So I don't think it's a horrible movie. I don't think it's devoid of praise at all. I just think it's trying to be something that could be and should be like a 9 out of 10. It should be like a great, great, great film. And in my opinion, it just falls really short, mostly in the writing department.
Now, like I said, I got lost in the narrative. I mean, I could have missed something that was very important to the plot line, but I do know that her daughter died, and Ollie had a demon inside him that was supposed to resurrect the daughter by using the other blind girl. I got lost on how the demon got in him because I know she was watching videos of the ritual done, and it wasn't Ollie in the video. She wasn't in the video, so I'm like, did she find these amateur videos and do this herself? I just got lost. I missed something somewhere on, that particular plot line.
you didn't miss anything. This is just the beauty of a film that doesn't spell everything out. So you're left
Okay.
to infer, you're left to infer what is taking place. So we know that she has been following these VHS tapes, and we saw her use some of the techniques from the tapes in the film. So we know that at least she's following along with them, and she's able to recreate what they're doing. The things that aren't shown, like how Ollie specifically gets possessed, that's left up to our own imaginations how that happens. And again, I like that that's not just explicitly shown on the screen. But no, I think that, Kevin, some of the issues that you're going to have with this film are maybe from you perceived that you missed something, but in reality, it's just that it was written that way. And I understand how somebody might not like that, but I think that, give yourself some more credit. I don't think you were just sitting there like completely lost. It's
Well,
not. It's
no,
just not spelled out.
I know I pay attention. I pay attention into the dialogue and everything like that. It just it didn't click for me though. The story didn't come together for me, and I have positive things to say about the movie. I mean, it felt dark. I mean, the way it was filmed, it felt dark, like it was gonna be a really good movie, and I was anticipating, something scary happening. The cinematography was great, but like I said, for the story, I felt like it fell short, and I mean, like I said, I could have missed something because you were praising it like it was great, and I missed whatever you saw in it.
Well, here's something that I think we agree on, Kevin. I think this was genuinely one of the most fucked up movies I've ever seen. It's not common for a movie to make me feel like to make me recoil back from something I've seen on the screen or make me feel genuinely disturbed or disgusted. And this movie does some really good things to disturb me. Like, obviously, it focuses a lot on child abuse, and it's really sort of jarring because I've never really seen a film, especially not in a theater, that focused on those really touchy, delicate themes like that. And also, the gross out scenes are not purely gore. A lot of horror movies, they try to be as disgusting as possible, but they basically try to do that with just blood and chunks and stuff like and flesh. But this film had all the blood and gore, but it also had vomit, urine, like drool. It was disgusting and creative in a way that I was not used to. And they didn't overdo it. It wasn't just a bloodbath from start to finish. It was actually kind of a slow burn, but when the gore is happening on the screen, it was impactful to me. So to reiterate what I first said, yeah, this was definitely one of the most fucked up movies I've ever seen.
I can agree with you that I appreciated the gore. I thought that was pretty good. My only complaint was with the story. That little Ollie kid creeped me the out, dude. When he put that knife in his mouth, it was chewing on it like it was a piece of candy. I was like, dude, that is up. And then when they pulled him out of the circle, he pulled him out of the circle, and that shit was going on in his belly. I'm like, dude, this is really good. But like I said, it didn't wrap up the way I expected it to wrap up. I mean, there was parts of the story I couldn't follow because I had no idea, how some of those events had, how they got into certain those points.
Yeah, and that's fair. I can extend an olive branch here. I don't think that the film was as streamlined as I would have wanted it to be. It was a little clunky in areas. For some reason, I don't take as much. I don't see that as a negative as much because it kept me guessing. So for me, it felt like I was lost in the darkness trying to find my way. And it was a little clunky, but I enjoyed the experience. But
Mm-hmm.
it seems like from your perspective, you were kind of like the writing should have been better and more streamlined. Is that kind of what I'm getting?
Yeah, and that's basically my only complaint. And I hate that I gave it such a low score because I went into the theater and I love the theater experience. I love going to the movies and I love having the popcorn, and the drink, and then when the lights go down and you get that dark undertone from the cinematography, I'm like, dude, this is gonna be good. And then the Ollie kid came out and I was a little creeped out by it, and I forget the names of the characters. I'm always bad with this, but the brother,
Andy.
uh, Andy, the guy that played him, did a really great job. The acting was good. The
Hmm.
lady that played, what was her name, Laura?
Laura.
Yeah, she did a really great job. I was like 5 minutes of the movie, said this woman is weird, So I felt the presence of the actors, but like I said, the story kind of killed the whole thing for me. And I hate to say that because I had the feeling I had during the movie while watching it was one of those ones where I was enjoying it, but when it wrapped up and there was no conclusion, and I was had questions about certain things in the movie and how they had transpired, I was like, I don't know.
Essentially, this film deals with a pair of step siblings. The older brother's name is Andy, he's 17, and then the younger sister's name is Piper. I forget her exact age, but she's visually impaired. She can just see blurry shapes and lights, and that's it. So Andy and Piper, very early in the film, find their father dead on the bathroom floor. So that's an intense scene, generally speaking, because there's male nudity, there's blood, and there's vomit all in that scene. So it's a little jarring in the sense that you're not expecting that from some, oh, I'm going to the movie theater this weekend to see a movie type deal. Like that's the type of thing you expect to see in like a underrated 2011 indie horror film that nobody's ever heard of. So that right there introduced me to the fact that they were going to try to push some boundaries with this. But anyway, so they encounter their father dead. They no longer have a guardian. Andy is not old enough to be Piper's legal guardian yet, so they enter the foster system. They are paired with a foster mother named Laura, who has also recently lost a child. She's dealing with grief as well.
And by
And
the way, it
her
is at this point, about 15 minutes into the film, that I understood exactly what the entire film was about, and the rest was completely predictable. And yeah,
So it's broadly predictable. I mean, the film is literally called "Bring Her Back," so I mean, you're kind of understanding what's going to happen, like you said, within the first 15 minutes. But hey, I was at least intrigued by. I didn't know specifically how she was going to be brought back or how that was going to be attempted, so I was still engaged at this point. But you're right. I mean, it's predictable. Anyway, so they're introduced to this foster mother, Laura, who, side note, has also worked in mental health for like 25 years. So there's a few character traits about Laura, such as her being a mental health professional, her already having a child at one point, and she appears stable, but she's not at all, and that's apparent to Andy very quickly. But to the other adult characters, she seems completely normal. So there's a disconnect between what is actually happening to the children and what is the adults are perceiving is happening to the children in Laura's care. And I will say this gave me definite like Count Olaf vibes. Like everybody thinks he's just this normal great guy, and in reality he's like a sadistic maniac. And Laura, the psychotic foster mother, is in the same boat here. Chaos ensues. Laura is following this ritual that's on these Russian VHS tapes, which are extremely creepy, by the way, to try to bring her daughter back from the dead. Her daughter was blind, just like Piper, and she drowned in the pool. And the entire film consists of Laura essentially trying to get Andy out of the way so that she can enact this ritual on Piper. And another aspect, as Kevin mentioned earlier, there's a character named Ollie, or at least called Ollie, who it's not apparent at first, but Laura has kidnapped him and has gotten him possessed by some entity, and he is being used as a vessel to sort of hold on to this entity until Piper can be killed. So, without getting too much into the minutia, we'll talk about the ritual later. The entire film consists of Andy trying to get in Laura's way, Laura trying to get Andy out of the way. It's sort of like a cat and mouse game between Psycho and well-meaning older brother. And then, that's all we need to really get into right now.
There's something, and this is why plot points are important to me. There was a part in the movie earlier on where, before they even went over to Laura's house, the what's her name, Wendy, the lady that was, she's like, well, we're gonna split you up. And then they said that you are. She had problems with a male before. It's not probably not gonna work. The thing that got me messed up there was if she was trying to get Andy out of the way, why bring him in the first place? I mean, it had already been established that they were going to be separated, that there was no need for, that she had problems with males before. So that was one of the points that I kept trying to figure out is why bring him in to the house if you're just going to push him out? It seemed like extra work for me. I didn't get that part of it.
I do think that's explainable, and that coming from someone who does not like this film, I do think that part is explainable by the fact that she specifically wants Piper because Piper is visually impaired, and her daughter, who died, was visually impaired. And Andy basically draws a red line, and both of them together say, like, we don't want to be separated. I don't know, legally, maybe there was a way to get around that, but I think she just realized that there was going to be more work to try and convince them to separate than for her to just take both of them.
Yeah, exactly. And so Laura, her method to get Andy out of the way is to make him appear unstable, dangerous, violent, and like a child who needs to be institutionalized. So there's this huge gaslighting happening constantly through the film. So Andy is constantly being gaslit and manipulated by Laura, and it's one of the things about this film to me is it is extremely emotionally exhausting. So you're watching these children get manipulated, verbally abused, tricked, like dealing with their own grief, watching them get physically abused to the point of like a child chewing on a knife until his teeth splinter and his mouth bleeds. Like
Okay,
it is
I do want to butt in one thing. Like,
sure.
I don't know how much I consider this film to really cover like child abuse very much. Mostly just because most of it is in a context that is so far from being believable or realistic that it's like I don't consider like a child being possessed by a demon and gnawing on wood, breaking his own teeth off. I don't think that can be put into a box called child abuse. Like that is that's just entirely and completely different. And there's also a lot of horror films that have had children possessed by demons and of course their bodies get messed up when they're demonically possessed. This is not pioneering in any way to have like children being influenced by demonic entities.
Yeah, I sort of disagree. I mean, I just think that the amount of what is happening physically and emotionally to these children throughout the film is unique. And of course, everything borrows from everything. Like, I'm sure this has been done before, and he didn't like, or the brothers didn't come up with they didn't come up with like children being harmed in horror films. But this film does it differently than I've personally seen before. It was like a nice little new flavor of it, and it was really emotionally exhausting. Like The Exorcist, great film where a child gets possessed and her body is like completely destroyed and rearranged. That's not as emotionally exhausting. In fact, that sort of leads me to something else I wanted to say. This is considered a horror film, but I actually think the proper genre would be psychological thriller, and that was one of the first things I said to you after we left the theater. That wasn't really horror. It was like it was definitely psychological torture in a way.
I could see that.
Well, let's talk about a couple things that I think are good with the film specifically. The foreshadowing was like we talked about how the film, at least its concept, is predictable. There was foreshadowing that was shown in the beginning of the film where you know that they're putting emphasis on this for some reason. You just don't know what the reason specifically is. So I've listed a couple of examples here, and I'm going to go through just a couple. There's this pool in Laura's backyard that has been drained, presumably because her daughter drowned in it, and due to grief or whatever, the pool has been drained. But there's a little pipe that has sort of been rigged to collect rainwater, and it's basically raining throughout this entire film. So over the course of a couple weeks, it's just constantly raining, and the pool is slowly collecting water and slowly becoming more and more full. So I thought that was a nice touch. Like, you understand that in the climax of the film, something is going to happen in that pool. The pool is given a lot of significance. Also, when the children first enter Laura's house, one of the first things they encounter is actually a stuffed dog, a stuffed, I think, Pomeranian, and they sort of make like a quirky little joke about it. But that's showing you right off the bat that Laura, as an antagonist, her flaw is that she cannot accept death. She can't simply bury the dog. The dog dies, and it has to be stuffed and placed in her house as if it's still alive. So even before she conceptualized this idea of bringing her daughter back, or even before her daughter even died, she had serious hang-ups about death. Like, that is not normal to stuff a pet instead of just burying it. I don't think that's normal at all. So these examples of foreshadowing, I think, are actually pretty well written and pretty good. Another thing, and I'll just give one more and then we can sort of move on because the other ones I want to get to later. So Piper pretty much immediately says, "How did your daughter die?" And Andy's like, "Piper!" But Laura explains anyway. She talks about how she drowned, and then she's like, "I felt so terrible as a mother leaving her in the ground. I couldn't imagine leaving her in the ground and driving away, and I'm in my bed and she's buried." So as the viewer at that point, you're like, wow, I mean, she felt really bad about having to put her daughter in a grave. Like, that's understandable. But in reality, she said that because she didn't leave her daughter in the ground. Her daughter was it was exhumed by her, taken back to her house, and then put in a freezer for a few weeks.
That crossed my mind when she said that line. When she said that line, I was like, yeah, she's got her daughter's in the house somewhere. And then when the door was locked on that little shed, I was like, yeah, the daughter's in there. I mean, I didn't expect it to be in a freezer, but I kind of thought she'd just be somewhere in there just hanging out and whatnot. But I agree with you. The foreshadowing was good. It was written well. It just, like I said, the way it didn't wrap up is probably the only bad part about this movie, because I was 75% through this movie. I was into it. I was like, this is pretty good. And just when it circled around in the end and didn't conclude itself or anything like that, I was just like, I don't know.
It's very tough. I want to give you plenty of chance to talk about why you like the film without just rebutting you on every point. Basically, if you like every single thing you've said in this video so far, I could pretty much just say like the polar opposite. Um, and so, like I think this is one of those experiences where we just have to chalk it up to to some extent we have to chalk it up to like severe differences in opinion, because I could literally fight you on every single thing that you've said, but if you want to have your moment in the limelight of praising the movie and I want to have my moment in the limelight of, sort of talking bad about the movie, then we have to let each other speak to some extent.
Well, of course. And the thing is, I'm fine with you rebutting every point because there's going to be viewers out there that agree with you and they don't agree with me. So, like, we
Well, a
have to show
lot
both
less
sides.
viewers. To be fair, I will grant, like, I'm very much aware that the impressions of this movie are overwhelmingly positive. It's very difficult to find anyone say anything bad about this film. They're out there. There's some critic reviews that voice opinions that I share, mostly just about emotional resonance and shallowness. But I am aware that like almost every single person will disagree with what I say. But maybe there's one viewer that will be like, I'm not crazy. Someone else thought that it was shallow and predictable and lame and poorly written. I think a lot of aspects of the movie are fine. Like the music and the sound design, it's not memorable, but it's okay. Cinematography, there's nothing ultra unique about it, or
Hmm.
there's parts of it that I actually kind of don't like, but there's also parts that I do like. It's all right. Even like the performances of the actors, it's fine in my opinion. In terms of the overall story, like the structure, the plot beats, if you look at it skeletally, it's almost fine. And that's why I have sort of a C for this movie, is because I think that there's the structure, there's almost like the foundations and the structure for like an A to S tier movie. And then I think that like the details of how they fleshed out the story or didn't flesh out the story and the characters just brings it down.
Okay, so we're gonna skip a couple of events and we're just gonna jump right towards the final acts of the film. So Andy is at his wits' end. He's been in the hospital. He's suffered a severe head injury. He's seen the ghost of his dead father in the shower. He is actually psychologically breaking at this point. But he still knows that Laura is insane and he's still trying to stop her. So he goes back to Wendy, who is their counselor, mental health professional, and he's like, look, I have evidence that Laura has kidnapped a child. I have evidence that she is insane and abusing me and Piper. I need your help. You have to believe me. So the mental health professional, Wendy, begrudgingly goes to the house. And she's like, well, I know nothing's going to be wrong. We know Laura. We trust her. And Laura cleans up all the mess and signs of abuse and everything. But long story short, Wendy finds out that there's nefarious things going on. Uh, Laura kills her and actually kills Andy as well, which I was not expecting. So up until this point, Andy has sort of been the main character. You're seeing the film primarily through his eyes, and he all of a sudden is drowned in a puddle after being hit by a car. And I was not expecting that. So from like 70 or 80% of the way through the film, we lose our main character, which is also unique. Obviously, Alex is going to say that's a huge negative, but I at least wasn't expecting it, so I wasn't super mad. It caught me off guard. Anytime a horror movie can catch me off guard, I'm like, okay, I will give you some credit for that. So anyway, Laura isolates Piper. There are no adults who are around to stop this from happening, which is also an extremely creepy thought. And so the ritual is almost completely done. Ollie has consumed the flesh of Laura's dead daughter from the freezer. All he has to do is vomit it back onto Piper's dead body after Piper's drowned in the pool, and the ritual will be complete. At the very last moment, while Laura is drowning Piper in the pool that's now almost full with rainwater, Piper surfaces and she screams, "Mom!" And then that snaps Laura out of it because, and here's a quote from earlier in the film. Laura says, "I would do anything just to hear my daughter call me mom one more time." And in the climax of the film, Piper, in one last fight for survival, screams "mom," and then it snaps Laura out of it completely, and she is just overcome with guilt and emotion, and essentially just lets Piper go. Piper runs away and is picked up by two strangers. Um, the demon possessed Ollie wanders out of the circle, and that's one thing we didn't cover. Circles hold the possessed people inside, so the entire house is surrounded by this painted circle. Ollie gets depossessed, and Laura just chooses to hug her daughter's corpse in the pool until she's arrested. And let me say this before Alex jumps in and shoots me in the face.
I'm not going to jump in.
All of this emotional torment that I've been through up until this point in this almost 2 hour runtime, I shed tears in the final scene. It was just watching a psychologically destroyed mother hold her daughter's corpse in the pool after committing all these atrocities, and she's going to be arrested, and these kids have been abused and beaten and battered, and Andy's dead. Yeah, I actually shed a couple tears, and I was not expecting to. But and before you guys act like I'm some outlier, there was a dude in the theater behind me crying like 15 minutes before I shed 2 tears. And when I stood up and turned around, there was like an entire family crying, and they were like, "It's so good, it's so good." And of course, 5 minutes later, Alex was like, "Yeah, that sucked." But anyway, final thoughts on the ending. The ending caught me off guard. I know I was fully expecting to see some like massive demon possession. Like I didn't even know what to expect. I really thought the demon was going to enter Piper, and we were going to see what happened there. But they chose for the ending that I just described, and I don't hate it. Look, I don't hate it. Look, the whole film was a little clunky, but I enjoyed it.
I thought the third act was actually pretty funny. Okay. Look, the character actions. Let me start with this. In my opinion, the writing is so bad that there's no reason to care about the characters by the time you've reached the third act. And I could go into that in a little bit. But so that's where I'm at. Going into the third act, I'm pretty much detached. I'm like, this is dumb. I don't care about any of these characters. I don't know anything about any of these characters. This is ridiculous. But the third act goes so off the rails with the character decisions just all being like very, very dumb, and the writing decisions being even more dumb. I was genuinely laughing, and I actually genuinely feel bad. Like I want to apologize, Will, because I did not know you were enjoying it. In the third act, there was like 3 or 4 times where I was leaning over and making crack shots at the film because I was like amused by how poorly I thought it was going. And I didn't know I was like I'm sorry. I didn't know that you were actually trying to enjoy it at that point. But so no, I thought
wait, so you actually thought I was probably in the same boat as you, like silently hating it?
Yeah, I really thought you were. Like there was even one point where you were just like, I don't know, you were just sort of muttering, like kind of I think it was towards the end of the second act. You just made some sort of comment that to me sounded like you were saying like, "Oh man, like I was hoping this was going to be good and it's not." Like in less words. I misinterpreted that.
I was actually criticizing one thing that we can get into later that we actually both agree on, unless you want to just jump into it right now.
Go ahead, because I probably had the same thought.
So the scene, there's actually 2 scenes that I thought were a little just too predictable and too like nobody would ever do that. When there's a scene where Andy is preparing food for Ollie with like this massive kitchen knife, and so Ollie is a demon possessed child. So Ollie's just like grabbing the knife by the blade to try to bite the piece of mango off, and instead of like taking the knife out of his hand at least, Andy's just like, "All right, let me just leave the knife in your hand and turn around and start doing something in the cabinet." And then of course Ollie starts just crunching on the knife and shattering all his teeth out, and blood goes everywhere. I was like, okay, that was dumb. Nobody would leave a knife in a child's hand like that with holding the blade. And also when I made that comment that you're talking about was when the mental health professional went to the house.
Well, I'm going to butt in real quick.
Okay.
I do want to talk about the scene you're about to talk about. But with the knife scene, I think that's like a really good example of how I feel about the film as a whole, where there is a genuinely really good gore aspect to it, the knife biting, that scene, I mean, it looked really bad, and I imagine a lot of people had to look away during that scene because of how gnarly it was. And I'll give the film credit for good practical effects and pushing boundaries of like insanely gory stuff. But the context of how ridiculous and unbelievable the context for him doing that was completely pulled me out of it. I wasn't emotionally affected by that scene because I was like, that's absolutely brain dead to think that like Andy's character would have just handed this mute, obviously mentally challenged child a knife with a piece of fruit on it, watch him grab it by the knife and just be like, I'll just go under the cupboards and hide for a minute while I hear him gnawing
for
on the
30
knife.
goddamn seconds.
Dude, it's so dumb.
He was
Yeah.
he was turned around forever. I'm like,
Yeah, he didn't turn around
you don't
until
do
he
that.
heard the crunching of Ollie's teeth.
Like I'm so like, and that's how so much of this movie is to me. Is there's good elements, good ideas, good practical effects, just surrounded by really cruddy, not believable character decisions. But all right, we were going to talk about the social worker.
So when I leaned over and made the only comment that I think I made to you during the whole film, the mental health worker entered the house, and I leaned over to you and I said, "We know exactly how this is going to end. She's going to walk around oblivious to all the signs of abuse, which she does, and then she's going to find out in the last second and be killed by Laura." Now, they did sort of take me by surprise because in the moment that I thought Laura was going to kill her, she didn't. And you actually, for a split second, think that Wendy, who's the mental health worker, and Andy are going to get back to the car and be able to drive away. For a split second,
Well,
I was like, okay, maybe.
Nobody's actually thinking they're going to get away. That's like, there's no way.
Okay, nobody's thinking they're going to get away, but did you think an F-150 was just going to come crush her into the side of like a little car?
I don't care.
Was
I don't
good.
care if she'd killed them with a meteor from space. It doesn't make the scene good because I knew from the beginning exactly what was going to go on, and it also doesn't. It doesn't make sense the way that they showed up in the first place. Because now I'm not super well versed in police and social work protocols, but when a foster child, drives to your, I don't know what they call the place where the social workers are, but it's a police station. Drives to the police station. Someone has just reported that this like 17-year-old adult-sized male has hit his sister really bad. So we have an assault case on our hand. Assault and battery is in progress, okay? This has already been reported. The culprit, the suspect in the assault and battery case, has just showed up to the police station. And instead of putting him in cuffs and detaining him, and then going with police officers to the house to take photos of the damage, take witness reports and whatever, instead, they listened to him. They just let him talk to the social worker. And she's like, apparently you just, hit your sister in the eye really hard. And he's like, well, the person you put in charge of us is insane, and she has kidnapped this person who is on this poster. This poster is of a kidnapped child, and she is at that house. So now we have an ongoing assault and battery case and a reported location of a missing child, like an 8-year-old child, okay? And they still don't send cops to this house. They send one old lady with the kid. For zilch reason do they send... there's no way that makes sense. And so that's also context for why that scene I think is really dumb.
Well, I mean, I do have the comment that this was filmed in Australia, so maybe their methods are different.
Oh, that's actually very true.
I totally agree with you, Alex. I mean, there's no way. I mean, I think it was because she knew the lady, that she had worked there forever. That's the whole reason. But exactly, normally, if a child is, accusing a foster parent of doing this, they would send police officers to the house to check it out. That didn't happen. I knew as soon as the lady got in the car with him in the car to go to the house that she wasn't coming back from that house. I knew that she was going to die. What did surprise me is that they got him, that he ended up dying. I figured he got in the car, that she'd get hit by the car and she'd kill the lady, and then he'd just be in shock because he watched this lady murder. But no, he was hurt too, and then she put his head in the puddle. That part surprised me, but again, um, it didn't go anywhere. I couldn't put it. I couldn't piece everything together. You had a couple of nice pieces throughout the movie, but it didn't have its matching puzzle piece, and the story to me was confusing.
So let me say one more thing. So I want to say what I think is the most positive about this film, and then we can sort of pass it on. So I think that the ritual is an amazing concept for a horror film. You have this grainy, distorted Russian videotape that you can only imagine has been passed through the dark web, and you may only know about it through word of mouth. It's just and it's literally depicting a ritual in which you have to bring the corpse of one of your loved ones who has killed themselves or died tragically. You have to have another body that is possessed by some demon, and you have to have a person to kill in the same manner that your loved ones killed themselves. Like, that is really creepy to me. For some reason that like hits close to home or something. Like, the one that they showed in the film was presumably a husband who took his wife's body to this ritual, who had hung herself, and they have some victim who they hang. You have to kill the victim in the same manner of death that your loved one died. That is really creepy and honestly really original. That's not close to anything I've seen in horror before, and I like that. So the ritual is the strongest part of this film, and knowing that this film is part of a broader universe, and there's actually other films that are going to take place in this universe, that makes me happy, because I want to see this get expanded upon a little bit, because I think it's a good concept. And one more positive thing, a serious issue I have with a lot of horror movies is when they just show the demon. It's just all out there for you to see. It's the grand finale. You get to see the demon in all of its glory. That actually doesn't even really come close to happening in this film. There's like this grainy little blurry scene where you can see the demon, almost like the figure of the demon in the reflection in the bathroom, and that's really all they go with it. And look, whether you love or hate the film, I think that there can be another film in this universe that they write a little bit better. They're a little less clunky with it, and it turns out to be an amazing film. So that's what I'll leave you with.
I agree with your final take there. I do think they could use some of the concepts and, like, the ritual, some of the lore perhaps in this universe, and actually make something good. Are you okay with me going on like a 5-minute tangent?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I mean, you guys can stop me. I understand that there's probably a lot of things I'll say that maybe you would be able to, like, slightly argue against, but so when I say that I think the writing is bad, I think the best way I can explain what I mean is to just look at the characters and what I think is lacking with the characters. So, starting with Laura, this is the crazy lady. Her insanity is, for one, it's, in my opinion, revealed way too quickly and too obviously. It's like on the nose, like, oh, this person's insane, and she's going to do the ritual. Like, there's no question or wondering or ambiguity at all with her character in that regard. It's also not earned. If we think about a movie like Hereditary, which is a movie with similar themes and a similar intended takeaway, which is just like feeling horrible and being psychologically disturbed, it's a very similar thing. But you think about the psychological downfall of the mother in that film, that is earned because we see her before the tragedy, during the tragedy, and after the tragedy, and how she copes. And her descent is gradual, and we kind of go with her. In the case of this movie, the most damaged, insane person in the film is just assumed to be that way from the beginning, and they are that way from the beginning. In my opinion, they should have put some way in the story for us to kind of follow her or understand her motivations better, because it's not enough to just say, oh, she's insane and crazy because her daughter died and she couldn't accept that. To me, that is far from being enough to just retroactively explain. Not to bring Rebel Moon into this, but it's kind of like the Rebel Moon characters' backstories. It's like telling you this person is damaged instead of showing you. Also, the most baffling decision in this movie to me is that there's literally one character decision that affects the outcome of this film. One character decision, and it is from Laura, the insane person who is not a sympathetic character in the slightest. How is the only reason that Piper and Ollie escape is because Laura just relents from wanting to do the ritual? To me, that's ridiculous. And I'll just steamroll through a little bit. I'm sorry. But okay, Andy, the character. This is a kid that is supposed to be troubled. He's supposed to be has a history of abuse and abusing as well. And he's supposed to have like behavioral issues, etc., etc. That is not displayed one iota in the film. He behaves impeccably. He is respectful. He's collected. He's cool. I
don't agree with that.
Andy is nothing but nice to his sister. He is so careful and considerate. He's always worried about her. That is the only like character trait that they give him, is that he's worried and considerate for Piper, and that's his motivation throughout the entire film. It doesn't show him actually act out. I don't understand. Like you think that he does act out?
Yeah, no, I think they show things to show that he is unstable. Like, okay, so for example, when he first comes to the house and he leaves his phone out after he was talking shit about Ollie, and Laura picks it up since reading it, he's like, "Give me my phone," and then he like shoves her up against the wall. He's like, "Give me my fucking phone," and he's like right in her face. I'm sorry, but
that was a fairly
no.
understandable reaction.
No.
What she was doing, her actions in that scene were far worse than his actions.
Okay, but when I was 17, when any of us were 17, and a woman took our phone, we weren't gonna literally like shove her against the wall, get in her face, and say, "Give me my fucking phone." Especially that was the first like 20 minutes of meeting her. No, I think there are things shown throughout the film to show he is unstable. Like he's not just a cool, calm, and collected guy. I mean, Laura is a manipulative psychopath, but she's able to push him over the edge. I mean, there's scenes where he also like chokes her up against the wall and like punches a hole in the wall.
Well, that is literally 100% justified. He would have been justified in killing her in that scene, and I wish he had. I wish that that's what had happened in the movie. But like, to be fair, yes, he gets pushed over the edge. He gets pushed to a point where he like quote unquote acts out, but it's entirely from external motivators. There's nothing in the actual character of Andy that's like, oh yeah, this is a troubled teen. And to give maybe a proper example, his relationship with Piper, he is supposed to be harboring resentments for her. And you should be able to infer, partially just from the way it's written and partially just from life experience, that he would not only harbor resentment for Piper because everyone loves her more than him and he was abused and she wasn't abused, but also just because he has to take care of her. This is someone who's about to enter adulthood. He wants to be having his own life. He wants to be having friends, going out, having fun, experiencing new things. And instead, he's taking care of someone who is very much impaired and can't really take care of themselves. It would make a lot more sense for this film to have actually demonstrated some level of tension between Andy and Piper on an emotional level, rather than just having what actually happens in the film is that he lies to her once because he says that he looked at his father's face and he didn't. And she's like, "You lied to me." And from that point on, he is dead to her. For the rest of the film, she doesn't care about his input one bit. Which brings me to Piper, the last character I really want to talk about. And she's not even a character. She's not developed. We don't learn anything about her, like, desires, her goals. She is really just a plot device, and she is the one character that ends up actually surviving, well, other than Ollie. I don't understand how you can, like, you take this one very underdeveloped character of Andy and make him the primary focus of the first 2/3 of the film. Then you kill him, and then you take the non-sympathetic, insane villain and make them make a decision that saves the plot device that's not even a character. What is that? I find that structure absolutely ridiculous. I don't think any of the characters are like realistic, believable, sympathetic. I'm sorry. There's nothing in terms of character work here.
I think you just think all that because they're Australian.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to have to agree with him. I totally followed that. There was no indication throughout the entire movie that he was having issues, other than the fact that they said at 8 years old he did this. They didn't show him to be a troubled kid. They didn't show anything that said he had resentment towards his sister. agree 100% with Alex that they did not show that in the movie. You only pick up from that because he said it happened. You know, he said when I was 8, I hit you. You know, other than that,
No,
I thought the kid, like, I agree, he was well behaved. He did everything right. He was suffering. His dad just died, so I could understand a few of the issues he was having. The thing that threw me off though was her peeing in the cup and pouring it on him. That threw me off. I did not expect that. I was like,
yeah.
dude, this is gaslighting 101 right here. And I even thought about that. I was like, and I thought I was being gaslit by my ex. This lady is like the queen of gaslighting. So I
Well,
did not have any negative feelings towards that character at all.
well, you guys sort of muddied the waters a little bit. So there's two different things that I want to make clear. Andy, there are things in the film that go to show that he is generally unstable. But the fact that he can keep it together for Piper is important to the plot. They want that. Everything you just said about him being so good to Piper, yeah, that's supposed to be shown. Like whether Piper respects it or responds to it well or not, that's not the case. Like Andy is good. He wants to be on his best behavior so that he can eventually be Piper's guardian. Whether he's unstable in other scenarios, that's a different story. I'm not no no no. There I'm not trying to argue that no, he did show that he had resentment towards Piper in the film. No, that's they don't even want that to be shown. He had this little mishap when he was 8 years old that barely counts. That Wendy, the mental health counselor, doesn't even care about. She's like, fine, whatever, you guys can still live together. Like Laura is using every little morsel of information she can and that she can fabricate to make Andy appear as unstable as possible. And in some of those cases, she actually makes him go over the edge a little bit and raise his voice or punch a wall. That's what I'm trying to say. So he is shown to not have the utmost control and impulse control around his actions, and Laura just exploits that 100%. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to say that no, he did harbor resentment towards Piper. That's not really shown. He's shown to love her a
But we're
lot. So
told that he harbors resentment towards her, and we can also infer that he would, but it's just not
but
it. The film doesn't demonstrate it.
Yeah,
yeah,
nothing in the film showed that. It was all basically, I guess, it would be hearsay. It was just said in text. It wasn't
And
shown.
think about the way Piper treats him as well. Piper is almost entirely antagonistic to him in the film. The very first time he rolls up and comes to collect her from school, she calls him a pedophile in front of her friends. And then when they go to the funeral and Laura asks like, "Oh, what do you like to do?" She says, "Oh, me and my dad, we like to kick Andy in the balls," which is like kind of a joke, but at the same time, she only ever says things like that towards Andy. Like she's genuinely really mean to him, and so there's like there's no chemistry or believable bond between them, and the schism is also not really believable. Like I can imagine a film set in the same sort of bone or just like framework of story where the entire thing is focused on Andy and Piper having an initial believable relationship that is flawed, but also has elements of, believable like bonding between them. And throughout the film, things are happening that is turning them against each other. And you're thinking, you should be led to believe that like these are actually things that are happening that they should be turning against each other. Tensions rise, and maybe Andy actually does hit Piper, and he is, removed from the home situation. And then, towards the end of the movie, you find out that all of the stuff that you think was driving them apart was actually Laura. If they had actually managed to hide the fact that Laura was this nefarious force, that would be a really good reveal towards the end of the film. Or, alternatively, they could have eliminated Andy from this movie entirely and had a better film, in my opinion. They could have had the entire movie focused through Piper's view. They could have had a character who was as isolated and alone as you could possibly have. Someone who is basically blind, has just lost their last family member, and is sent to a new home, and they have to be in this completely new environment. They're completely alone, except for another character, Ollie. And you slowly learn throughout the film that Ollie has serious issues, but maybe she finds a way to work with him, and you can actually have character-driven resolution to the story where they, through their own shared issues, manage to defeat Laura, rather than what we have, which is just a bunch of plot driving the characters rather than characters driving the plot.
I'm going to say one more thing, and then that's all I have for this video. Did you guys not at least get a chill up your spine when it's the very end of the film, and up until this point, even when she's lying, Laura has made a point to sound as nurturing and mother-like to Piper as possible. And then in the lead up to the climax, Piper's like, "What are you going to do with me?" And Laura's like, "I'm going to drown you in the pool now, hun." You guys didn't have any sort of chill up your spine in that moment whatsoever.
I laughed at that. That was so dumb. Dude, when she literally just like explains to Piper exactly how she's gonna kill her, and then Piper's like, "Oh, that sounds bad," and then just throws like a big brick at her face. Like, that was